If humans truly had a soul that was permanent and eternal, the most obvious question arises: why do we not remember anything before this life? If permanence implies continuity, and if the soul supposedly carries identity, then where is the knowledge of what came before? Why do we enter existence as blank slates, unable to recall any past experience, wisdom, or history? One of the strongest arguments against a non-material origin of consciousness is that everything we know about the mind ties it to physical structure. Neuroscience shows clearly that thoughts, memories, emotions, and awareness emerge from the activity of neurons. These processes rely entirely on electrochemical signals traveling through a material system, the brain. When that system stops functioning, consciousness stops with it. There is no known mechanism, no demonstrated physics, by which experience could continue after the destruction of its substrate. To grasp the scale of this material foundation, consider the physical dimensions of the brain. 1 millimeter equals 1 million nanometers. The average human brain is approximately 140 millimeters wide, gives 140 million nanometers. 167 millimeters long gives 167 million nanometers. 140 millimeters high gives 140 million nanometers. If you multiply these dimensions, 140 million times 167 million 140 million approximately equals 3 to 7 3 to 100 nanometers. That's the physical volume, the nanometer scale architecture where you exist. We are biological machines, temporary structures in the universe. Everything that makes you, every thought, emotion, memory, and identity arises from a particular arrangement and dynamic pattern of matter. When that arrangement is destroyed, you cease to exist for all time. It's no different from a phone. When the hardware fails, the data isn't magically preserved somewhere else. The stored information and the device that holds it are inseparable. There is no hidden backup, no floating soul waiting to reattach. Once the physical configuration that sustained your subjective experience is gone, your awareness ends. And even if you created an infinite number of human beings, no two would ever share the same consciousness. Each brain produces a separate, isolated subjective experience. Even a perfect copy of your brain wouldn't be you, it would be a new observer, with its own perspective, even if it began with your memories. Identity is tied to a specific physical instance. A recreation, no matter how accurate, is still a different mind. The atoms in your body don't disappear, they return to the universe, recycled endlessly. But your consciousness isn't the atoms. It's the process those atoms were performing. When the brain shuts down, that process stops. The energy disperses. The structure dissolves. And with it, the awareness that structure produced disappears forever. Nothing persists if you accept matter returning to the universe. Traumatic brain injuries and dementia disprove the existence of a soul. My definition of a soul is an immaterial entity separate from our physical bodies that will be granted a place in the afterlife, heaven, hell, purgatory, or any other immaterial realm that our physical bodies cannot access, or transferred into another entity to be reborn. The key part of this is that the soul is immaterial, meaning that physical occurrences do not impact the soul. For example, death does not damage the soul, because the soul is immortal, and when the physical body dies, the soul is transferred into another form. Whether this other form is an afterlife or a rebirth or anything else is irrelevant. We can call this the immateriality requirement. The other requirement for a soul is that it is a repository of who you are. This can include your memories, personality, emotional regulation, or if you have anything else you think should have been included, please feel free to comment. I will summarize these traits into the personality requirement. So this brings us to the concept of brain damage. Brain damage is when you incur an injury that damages your brain. Depending on where this injury is located, you can lose your emotions, memories, personality, or any combination thereof. The classic case is the case of Phineas Gage. However, Gage was hardly the first or only person to experience this. You can find many others. If the soul is an immaterial repository of your personality, then why is it able to be damaged by something material like brain damage? Brain damage is not the only way. Either tumors, drugs, alcohol, electricity, oxygen deprivation, and even normal aging can also damage your brain and alter your personality. If the soul is not immaterial, then why is it able to survive death? Why is a minor damage able to damage your personality, but not a huge damage like the entire organ decomposing? If the soul does not involve your personality, then in what meaningful way is it you? Traumatic brain injuries can cause memory loss, personality change, and decreased cognitive functioning. This indicates the brain as the center of our consciousness and not a soul. If a soul, a spirit animating the body, existed, it would continue its function regardless of damage to the brain. Instead, we see a direct correspondence between the brain and most of the functions we think of as us. Again, this indicates a human machine with the brain as the CPU, not an invisible spirit. Besides the lack of any evidence for a soul, it's pretty easy to make a human appear soulless by damaging specific parts of brain matter. The brain drives consciousness and our experience of being human. Once it dies, so does the concept of us.